Dear Mama, where do we belong? Where can we be safe? Where can we be brave? Where can our children thrive? Where can we be free? More and more Black mothers are finding the answers to these questions beyond the borders of America. In this episode, we explore these questions with daughter of the diaspora, Parthenia Luke, descendant of formerly enslaved Black folks who left America in the late 1800s for Liberia. And it gets tight, y'all, because it's an honest, raw, and real conversation about what it means for Black Americans to leave America and what it means for us and our children to stay. And as always, thanks for rocking with us. And don't just listen, subscribe and follow us on all social media platforms at Them Black Mamas Podcast so you won't miss a moment of the magic. Please keep emailing us, keep engaging with us through social media comments, your reviews, and SoundCloud comments. Keep sharing us, even if it's only with one other person. If you're a new listener, welcome to the ride. If you're a newbie or an OG, become a magic maker by joining our email list and invest in us by purchasing a Magic Evermore box. The intention of this box is to help you alchemize the magic inside. Items include a full Black Mama Magic card deck, 4 manifestation crystals, incense from Smell Good Spa, a Magic Evermore picture frame, Black Mama Magic postcards, a gratitude jar, and the herbs jasmine, eucalyptus, and lavender, which represent healing, creativity, and liberation. And the best part is it's an investment in yourself and an investment in Them Black Mamas Podcast. When you invest in us, you are investing in a platform curated by 3 Black women actively creating spaces of healing, creativity, and liberation. Links to purchase the Magic Evermore box and join our email list are in our show notes on our website at demblackmamas.com. That's DEM Black MAMAS.com. Now, let's jump into episode 47 of
Them Black Mamas.
Welcome back to the ride. The mothership has landed and you're inside the Black Mama Magic Room with the greatest podcast on earth. I think I love it more and more every time I say it.
What, G-Po?
Just the whole introduction.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's growing on me.
Thank you, Thea. I appreciate you, my sister.
You don't appreciate me?
Let's move forward.
Oh, look who's trying to keep us on track today.
She got somewhere to go, y'all.
I got a hair appointment. This is too much hair on the side of my head. And Kristen
That's what it is. She got somewhere to go.
Whatever, Scorpio.
Love you.
Whatever. There was this character in anybody that watched the originals, I knew his ass was a Scorpio. His name is Lucian. Look him up.
How would you just identify and just know someone's a Scorpio? How could you?
Because the grudge this man had was over a millennium.
I forget a lot of stuff, but not everything.
You don't forget a lot of.
Don't forget if you cross me now. I don't forget that.
See? There it is.
Okay, so we're really excited about the guests that we have for this episode. Her name is Parthenia Luke. She is a descendant of the formerly enslaved Black folks who went to Liberia following I don't even know how to put it. So I pause on that because I think about the emancipation of Black people. So it was like we asked for permission to be free, and that's really not what happened. You know what I mean? Like we fought for our liberation.
Like a request was granted.
Yeah. Like someone else was in charge of our freedom when, you know, we really had to fight for that, you know, and push for that. So I just thought so many times Liberia is left out of this conversation about Black people leaving the United States. And like that's happened before in mass that they went to a specific place. So I think it's so important that we know our collective history, especially now at a time when so many Black women, particularly Black mothers, thinking about, in the process of, or have left this country.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to talk to her. We've already recorded it, but it's a really, really powerful, and it gets tight up in the Black Mama Magic room.
It does.
So
It
really,
does. Not all of it's comfortable.
So ain't nothing wrong with tight.
It's tight, but it's right.
It's tight, but it's right. You know, my pastor says that, and I feel some type of way when he says that. It's
He's
tight,
not wrong,
but it's
though.
right.
He's not wrong. Oh, wait. Are you going someplace not saintly with that?
Whenever he says it, I don't think saintly. It's tight, but it's right. Makes you think
I'm
saintly.
just gonna leave this here because
So
we all know my opinions on this matter.
So
How many kids you got, Nikisha?
It's tight, but it's right.
And that adds up to 4 whopping children.
Okay, Black people.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
So so we'll start with our positive reading. We'll go into our church announcements, followed by our mac and cheese, and we'll end with Black Mama Say. So we're ready to jump into these cards?
Yes.
Yep. Do you all want to give me a number, or do you all want me to just pull a card?
Well, 11.
11.
Okay.
Beans don't burn in the kitchen.
Oh, seems like it's timely. What you got there?
I got
What
it.
is
I
it?
got it.
Found it?
I got it.
What are the cards telling us today?
Magic is real. You are the proof.
Yeah.
You are. You are.
Inhale. Exhale. That felt sweet to my soul.
Nice. So this is card number 11. Dear Mama, you are living proof that magic is real. Your story is a fantastical tale of imagined dreams come to fruition. Yes, this is fantastic writing. Your power to heal, manifest, and create can only be explained as magical. You, majestic, beautiful, healed, healing, creative, you are magic personified. Sprinkle a little of your dust on the world today.
Yes.
Nikisha, I think you wrote that.
I think she did.
Yeah, I think you wrote that.
Now taking writing opportunities. Hit me up.
Oh, now you're taking writing opportunities? I can't.
Don't judge me. Don't do that.
So that was our responsive reading from the Black Mama Magic card deck. So let's move into our church announcements. Yeah. So this is the portion of our show where we talk about what we have going on individually or collectively as Dim Black Mamas podcast. This is our church announcements, praise reports, and prayer list request. So does anybody want to go first, or do I go first?
No, who's not going first?
Oh, okay.
I will go first.
That's worse.
No. Here's the thing. I don't even know what to put on the church announcement prayer request. I am in a space in my life right now where I just can't call it. We ain't said that in a while. I can't call it. That should be a part of the Black people literary sayings.
I can't call it. Yeah, for sure.
I can't call it. I really can't right now. I can tell you the consistency things. The book will still be on sale. The text line will probably still be available. We're going to try to keep that going because why not? But I feel like we're in like this vortex of quantum leap change. We're like from literally episode to episode, moment to moment, things are changing so fast. It's so hard for me to put my finger on it. So I'm putting all of us on a prayer list.
Yes.
For stability, really to know what we know, to move in objectivity and clarity without apologizing, and to just hold tight, right? Hold on. Don't get caught up in the things that are moving around us.
Change is coming. You can make it.
We can make it. I just think we have to not doubt right now.
If you're having a trying time, sounds of blackness. Sounds of blackness.
Oh my God. Be
sounds
optimistic.
Of blackness.
What are you talking about?
Keep
as
on.
long as you keep your what? Your head.
The
to
blackness.
sky. The blackness. So I just want to get that out there and say, I don't know, people. Hold on to God's unchanging hand and just trust yourself. Above all, in this season.
That works.
That's all I got. That's a little mini sermon.
You've done enough work to be where you are right now, to allow yourself to have this moment.
Indeed.
So don't judge. To all the mamas out there, don't judge yourself where you are right now. Just be where you are. Embrace it. Yes. Thanks, Thee. And I received that prayer. I received
Same.
that prayer. I received
Same. I need it.
Oh, it's 11:11 out here. Oh, we did that.
Oh, it is 11:11 out there.
And we did 11 card. The card 11.
We did.
Okay, that's it.
We
I'm
did.
done.
That's their number for today. All right. So for me, I think we'll be rolling into another PM edition of Say Less, and it was live last time. Nikki and Nikki's silent co-working space was popping. We had the most people we ever had this last time, and I think maybe some DBM, some Black Mama showed up. So come through. It's the Blackest most productive space in these internet streets. I'm telling you, it is. We have a good time. That song, some of the songs you were just singing, Thea, are on the playlist in there.
I love it.
Yes, but I think that's about it for me.
Okay, what Mondays is it?
AM from 8 to 11 a.m. Eastern is the first Monday of the month, and PM is the third Monday of the month.
Good. I'm glad it's going well.
That's good.
And I'm
yeah.
glad some of our magic makers are showing up. I really, really am. So, okay. So our Magic Evermore boxes are still on sale.
Get it,
I just love how it sounds. Magic Evermore.
They're beautiful.
Magic Evermore. So those are still on sale. When you buy those, you're investing in our platform. 3 Black Mama creatives who are actively creating spaces of healing, creativity, and liberation for Black folks. And inside that, you'll get a full Black Mama Magic card deck. That's 54 cards. We have some manifestation crystals, our favorite incense from Smell Good Spa. We also have some Black Mama Magic postcards that I'm really excited about, a gratitude jar, and also the herbs jasmine, eucalyptus, and lavender, which represent creativity, healing, and liberation. I think that's everything that's in there. There may be a little bit more in there, but go ahead and order your box because you help keep our podcast sustainable.
Yes.
Okay, well, those are our church announcements, our praise report.
Let's hear it.
I finished my first semester in grad school.
Oh, congratulations.
And I'm starting my second semester. And this time next year, my book will be completed and I'll be preparing to graduate. So
that's amazing. This time next year, that's so fast.
That's so fast.
That is a lesson in, let's take a Black Mama creative lesson break right here. That is a lesson in time is going to move anyway. Time could pass and you have no degree and no book. Or time could pass and you have a degree, a book, a hit podcast. So this whole when is the right time is not the right time. The moment you start is the moment the clock starts.
That's good. Because there was a part of me that felt like, well, is it too late? And all of those things in terms of going back to school. And also it's a testament to trusting yourself and listening to yourself to pause. Because had I not taken that pause last year, I wouldn't have applied to grad school. Yeah. Because I wouldn't have sat with myself and say, what do I really want out of this life?
What
and
I
I
really want from a... It's just... I thought about... I held it for like 3 seconds and then...
You just couldn't.
It has to come out. Yeah. Fire shut up in her bones is what that is.
The music is shut up in her bones. But it's a testament of sitting with yourself and really asking yourself, what is it that I really want and what is it that I need? And I needed to be in a writing space that nurtured me, where I wasn't the person giving, where it was just all being poured into me. And this low residency program has been exactly that. And it
had deadlines.
It had deadlines.
I knew that was going to come up. I knew that was going to come up.
Well, I mean, Nikisha,
and accountability.
Let me ask you something. So are you...
That's a Black Mama say too.
Are you suggesting that the only way I'm going to get this book finished is if I go back and get another master's? Is that what you're saying to me? I got to get in the program?
Or hire somebody, pay money for somebody to ride you like a horse to hit them dick.
Here's what I will say. I don't think you have to go back and get a master's to do it. And I chose a very specific program that's not traditional, that's very self-directed. I do think you have to be in an environment that's an accountability environment. And whether or not that means that the 3 of us get together and we decide on a time and we show up every time and we write.
I love that, though. I love that you have a space where you can go that's completely dedicated to growing you in this area, and there's room for you to write and get it out, and not anybody calling you, asking you for dinner, all the things. Kids constantly, all our people needing us constantly, but you have this set aside time that's dedicated for you. I think we all.
But I
deserve
had
that.
to decide though.
Yeah.
Because this little residency program, I'm away for 10 days. So people can still call me and say, what can we eat? But I decided this is the time I'm going to take. You know, no one's going to give us the time. So, and no one is supposed to give us the time. We're supposed to decide.
Okay, then.
What we're going to, you know, do with the time. But I mean, if you're ready for the accountability, we can do it, boo.
We'll get back to that. More on that later.
Because I want you to write the book too.
That book is past its prime, child. It's another book. It's another book coming. No?
The fact that we are still calling it the book. We ain't calling it by a title yet. It's too much for me.
Why does it always turn into a therapy session for me up in these things?
Nikisha, you know it's not always a session for you. Nikisha, we have seen Thea heal in real time on this podcast, and we all know my story. So I'm just saying.
I came out the spiritual closet on this podcast.
She healed from her breastfeeding journey on this podcast.
Halloween trauma and my Christmas trauma on this podcast.
So much trauma.
So
much trauma.
So I'm just saying.
All right.
I mean, if you're ready for the accountability, let's go. Listen, I recorded Nikisha do a session for the Birth and Breastfeeding Leadership Institute that's launching soon, right? And that presentation is fire. And you should implement that.
That's not a.
You implemented that with the Atlas. Same thing.
Okay. All right. So is that the end of the segment?
Let us know in the comments.
I can feel it. Like that.
Let us know in the comments if you want Nikisha to write this book and join the accountability crew. Let us know in the comments, like people. That's it. We're creating a group, the accountability crew.
You know, Black
Mama Creative Accountability Crew.
You heard it here first, people. You heard it here first.
Okay, so those are our church announcements, praise reports. Please keep those things in mind. The links for everything will be in our show notes on our website, DEMBlackMamas.com. That's DEM, DEM, shout out to African American Vernacular, Black Mamas, MAMAS.com. And make sure that you are following us on all social media platforms at DEMBlackMamas.com, and that you're on the mothership. Which is our email list, so you can get our monthly newsletter and you won't miss a moment of the magic. And now we're going to jump into the mac and cheese, which is the juiciest portion of our episode, because we all know mac and cheese is not the side dish. It's the main dish.
Parthenia Luke, she, her, is a social worker by passion and profession. She is moved by anything concerning social justice, especially as it relates to the human right to be and to belong. As an emerging scholar working towards a PhD in social work, Parthenia sheds light on the long-term implications of gentrification for individual residents and for entire communities. Parthenia also works as an instructor in higher education. Bless your soul. We'll talk about that later. Adjacent to that role, she advises administrators and leads efforts to promote a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable experience for graduate and undergraduate students. Parthenia's assessment and investigative skills cultivated by years of management work before returning to school has not gone to waste. She also contracts with defense attorneys as a mitigation specialist and social historian for individuals facing capital punishment. That is awesome.
That's amazing. And needed in South Carolina.
Oh, absolutely. Parthenia is the mother of 2 children, both of whom most certainly have been here before. To maintain an equilibrium among their demands, the challenges of social justice work, and her needs, Parthenia allows balance to find her through all things earth and fire, water and air. She enjoys morning hikes, afternoons by the ocean, or evenings near a fire. She is also obsessed with caring for her vegetable garden and doting over her countless houseplants. Is this my cousin?
I knew you were going to say that.
You kind of look like me too.
Connection.
Listen. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
That could have definitely been part of your bio, Thea. It could have been.
I see a through line. So welcome to the podcast. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Welcome to the mothership.
So
welcome
happy
to the
be
Black
here.
Mama Magic Room. We're glad to have you. We're excited about this conversation. Today, you're joining us, I would say, as a daughter of the diaspora, because I've known you for a while virtually. And I saw one of your posts that you returned to Liberia for the first time. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that about her. And in a group that we're in together, you made a statement that you left Liberia as a young child because of a coup. And I was like, wow, that was very, very interesting to me. So today you're joining us to talk about Liberia, to talk about your family's history there, and to see what we can learn from a Black mama about liberation beyond the borders of the U.S. and also about your journey back to Liberia. So welcome to the Black Mama Magic Room.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank y'all so much.
Happy to have you. I can't wait to learn from you.
So part of the reason this topic is interesting to us is because we know so many Black people who are thinking, what is home? Where is home? Where is safe space? And where can we take our families? We talk about that amongst ourselves and exploring that too. So tell us a little bit about your family's narrative around Liberia.
Yeah, so my family's narrative around Liberia, it's very complicated. I don't know how far back y'all want me to go.
All the way back.
But
Take it back.
all the way. All right.
We want to get to the roots. The roots.
We like
Okay,
roots.
to the
We
roots.
do like
all right.
roots.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far back as I understand my family's history to be in connection to Liberia, it goes all the way back to 1869. So we're talking after the Civil War, after the 13th Amendment, after Reconstruction. There was an organization called the American Colonization Society. I don't know if y'all have heard of this.
Teach.
So... So look it up when you get a chance, the American Colonization Society. But there was one individual, Alonzo Poggard, who from what I understand is my great-grandmother's great-grandfather. And he and many others, people who were enslaved, who were then freed from North Carolina, from Pennsylvania, from a few other places across the U.S., went over to Liberia, and they quote-unquote founded a place called Arlington. Now, I put quotes because they founded it by force. So first they tried to give gifts and all of that stuff to the indigenous people, but then they just took it by force and essentially colonized what came to be known as Arlington.
This is where it gets uncomfortable.
I'm just going to pause you right here. Here. Because, Black folks, I just want everyone listening to take a deep breath.
It's getting a little squeezy.
Because we don't like to think of ourselves as colonizers. We sort of romanticize us as a people who didn't mimic white supremacy in any way. And so I know that may be a very hard thing for us to hear, but I think it's very important that we know that about our history. So go ahead.
Absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out because with me, I guess I've thought about it so much and kind of, lived in it that I don't think about how that can be jarring for a lot of people. But so I'm glad you said that. So fast forward then I'm sure, a lot happened in between these times. But fast forward over 100 years to around 1985, 1990. As you can imagine, if this is happening across Liberia, you're going to have issues. You're going to have problems between the indigenous people and the people who came in. And you're having issues with folks in government, people not being treated well. So essentially, there are uprisings. The first one is in 1985, which coincidentally is on my birthday. My parents were in the States. They couldn't find my aunt until my mom went into labor early. And so I was born on the day that they say the rebels came. So they say that's why I'm a rebel, was because I came with the rebels. So that was 1985. The coup was not successful. We moved over to Liberia when I was a few months old. And we stayed there until 1990, and that coup was successful, the coup by Charles Taylor. So Charles Taylor took over the government. It's interesting for my family because Charles Taylor is from Arlington. Also, though, at the time, my family is in government under the Doe administration. And so we're kind of on both sides where it's like we're working for the government. My family is, in a way, representative of the government. But also, I have this family history of being from Arlington. And so it's like which side are you on? So it was coming from both sides. So we left the country at that time. And for me, I've been here ever since.
Parthenia, I would just want to fill in the gap. So from the time that Arlington was established in the late 1860s, 1870s to 1985 when you were born, when did your family leave Liberia and come back for you to have been born here?
Oh, okay. So my dad was sent from Liberia to the U.S. for school. So he went to Wilberforce University, which is interesting. Yes. If you know the history of Wilberforce as well. And he met my mom there. And so I was born to them in Ohio.
I don't know the history of Wilberforce. What's the history of Wilberforce? I feel like that was some tea that maybe us West Coasters.
You know, y'all real slim on HBCUs. So y'all,
we don't know all the tea.
Yeah. Now, from what I understand, Wilberforce is the oldest HBCU in the country. It was named after Wilberforce, who was an abolitionist. And so to me, it's just striking and very interesting that my dad would end up going to Wilberforce here in the States. So so that's how my family ended up here.
Okay, so he came here to be educated, met your mom, and then when you were born, him and your mom moved back to Liberia.
Yes. So they sent me first. I was a baby. And they sent me with my aunt, but I mean, that's kind of indicative of the culture, right? Like I'm not just my parents' child. I am the family's child. And so I was sent over first with my aunt and others. And it wasn't too long after that they came. And so we were planning on being there. I would be in Liberia now if it weren't for the coup.
And your mom wasn't born in Liberia. Only your father was born in Liberia. Wow, this is fascinating.
Right. My mom is Charlestonian. She was born in Charleston. Another amazing connection to West Africa as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I grew up in Charleston. So that's where I consider home for the most part.
The connection to West Africa is over 50% of the Black people living in the United States. Their ancestors came in through Sullivan's Island, which was a port where they brought in Africans, enslaved people.
Yes,
in South Carolina,
right, which is right in Charleston. Sullivan's Island's right near Charleston.
Do you remember much about the time you were there? I know you were young, but what do you remember about living there during that time?
I don't remember much. I only know what folks have told me through stories, and I only know upon returning the kind of gut feeling that I had of belonging once I arrived back. It's really difficult to explain, and I've tried to think more about it.
Arrived back here or arrived back
Liberia?
When you went there, you felt the gut feeling.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting because, like, in this day and time, what I hear a lot of conversations with Black mothers or Black women in general just saying, where can I go to get that feeling?
Yeah.
And then for some people, even when you trace your heritage, you go, but do you get the feeling, right? Does it feel yours? Do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like more yourself? And I think that is the challenge for a lot of folks right now.
It is. I mean, that's a big concept, belonging.
So you went back 2 years ago, right? It was your first time going back since you left during the coup, right? Was it 2 years ago?
Yes.
I think I saw.
It was 1 year ago.
1 year ago. Okay. So did you ever think that you would return?
Absolutely. Liberia always registered as home to me. Even though I left very young, I just always felt like it's where I was from. You know, if you think about the fact that I was, almost 5 years old, it's where I learned to walk. It's where I learned to talk.
All your the fundamentals,
Right, exactly.
Language, where you picked up language.
Right, and where I understood community. I distinctly remember when we came to Charleston, I was made fun of and bullied because of my accent primarily. And so I learned to change my accent.
That's really interesting in Charleston. From Black folks?
Yes. Oh, yes.
That's really interesting. Because okay, let me tell you why. So she's from Charleston, so that's the lower part of the state in South Carolina. I'm from Spartanburg, which is the upper part of the state in South Carolina. And I remember when other people making fun of people from Charleston for their accent. Now, South Carolinians making fun of people for an accent is a whole other thing as well. But I distinctly remember I had a friend. He was from Charleston and he moved up here to live with his uncle, and people would make fun of the way that he talked. He was Geechee. So I think it's very interesting because it's something that they experience, and not everybody from Charleston is Geechee, but it is something that they experience. So I think it's really interesting for them to make fun of someone with an accent as well. It's like this reoccurring mimicking of things that we do to treat others who look like us as outsiders. So that's really interesting to me.
And let me say this. So there's two things, right? So there's first, and you said it in your description, because I experienced that as well when I left Charleston, folks making fun of my Charlestonian accent, and again, me kind of changing. But in that is the going away. You have to leave Charleston to know that you have an accent. I did not know I had this Charlestonian accent until I left Charleston. And then the second part is that these are children, right? And we know that kids can be mean. And a lot of times as humans, we want to create in-groups and out-groups. And one of the ways we do it is through the ways that people speak.
Yeah, I think that's what resonated with me. Just being like an outsider, ways to categorize someone as not from here, is a thing that we do no matter where we are in the world. People tend to do
I think it's something we pass on. Because even the idea of kids being mean, like they're mimicking parents, right? So they're mimicking ideas and concepts that they get from their parents. So it's like the ways we pass on the understanding of an outside and an inside, and how we deal with differences even in the home, because we learn that first through siblings. This is this one and this is that one, and then it spreads outside of there. I could see how being and belonging could be such an important theme for your life, Parthenia, considering the different spaces you've had to move and navigate into. And maybe this is my question, like, where are you in your personal journey of being and belonging? Is it a state of being? Is it a place? Is it a consciousness? Like, what is it now for you, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, for me, it has become a consciousness because I haven't felt like I fully belonged anywhere, except really when I was in Liberia. And even then, it's different, right? As an adult navigating that space, even from, the stories I heard growing up, it's a different country than it was before. I've come to belong to myself. I've come to kind of appreciate who I am, what I present to the world, what I present to myself. And that is where I find my belonging at this point.
That really resonates for me, I think, for so many of us whose whole existence, and as far back as we can account for, has been here, based in the U.S., coming directly out of enslavement. And as much as we can, I think all of us at this point have done an ancestry or African ancestry, not Crystal. No, she good. But Thea and I have some sense. Thea has a much greater sense of where her ancestors were from and how they ended up in this place. And my lineage is from Cameroon, my maternal lineage. I'm not certain that if I were to go to Cameroon, if I would feel that sense of home and belonging. I've heard others say I didn't feel it there either. I don't feel it anywhere, right? And so I love the language around, you learn to feel it within yourself. You learn to find home kind of within, and wherever you move, you are, if you will. And I think that's probably a place we all will get to at some point.
And I didn't even really think about it until you asked that question, but kind of wherever I go, I've developed this feeling that I belong there. I'm supposed to be here, right? So everywhere I go, I develop community. I create that around me. And I have a sense of belongingness wherever I go, or I create that, I'll say.
You said you develop that wherever I go. I feel like I belong here. How?
I feel like that's uniquely Liberian. That did not come from here, right? Would you say that?
Well, actually, I got that from my mom. She didn't explicitly teach me that, but my mom was not afraid to talk to anyone. My mom is that mom who will talk for 30 minutes in the middle of the grocery store.
That's me.
To a
I'm your
stranger she just met.
And my mom.
I'm your mom. I gotta get dragged out of social gatherings. Everybody's at the car but me.
Yes. And I'm not that person, but I can still use those skills that I saw her use. It's also the giving when a new neighbor moves in, taking cookie, like things that folks don't really do much anymore.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. It does.
You ain't eating everybody's cookies. You know what I'm saying?
That is true.
You ain't eating everybody's cookies.
Yeah.
My neighbors don't even know what my real name is.
What day did you get?
Think you are?
Well, I don't want to say
Oh,
what
that's
name
true.
I
Okay.
gave them,
Okay,
but
that's
they-
true. Okay,
got
okay.
you.
I mean, they know my husband's name, but they don't know my real name. They don't know
Yeah.
my last name
I
or
have
any of
just
that.
learned
Yeah.
this today. That is amazing.
Yeah.
No, I understand it though.
I think that we have a little bit of a snapshot of who Parthena's mom is, though, from the fact that she was presumably early 20s where she started this family and was fully prepared to, one, send her baby off with her, with its paternal relatives
Yeah.
to another country, which is probably not something you
Yeah.
see
That's
in a
village and
native
community though.
Charlestonian.
That's village and community.
But she
in
was
other
from
parts of the world.
Charleston.
She was, but the way we raise family here is very different than the way other cultures are with family. Babies go off with aunties and uncles and
No. She was in college, coming from Charleston to Ohio. You see what I'm saying? Like, my point is, she adopted the kind of the norms, cultural norms of your dad pretty quickly, and then willing to move as well and leave. That says a lot about kind of who
Yes,
she is.
let me say also though, I don't think it was too hard of a transition for her because my mother's family were one of the first families to reside in an area called Ashleyville, which was the first Black neighborhood in the suburbs of Charleston, in what's called West Ashley. And so in that neighborhood, there was a lot of my family already, her family, her side of the family already there. So I think she already comes from this lineage of people who understand community kind of in a different way. And Charleston Black folk are a different
Yeah.
kind of Black folk.
Are different. Yeah.
The culture is completely different.
They held more of Africa or indigenous culture than the rest of us did.
I want to tease out something here that's like sitting with me, which is that like I've been thinking a lot also about being belonging and that it's in multiple ways that it exists, right? There definitely is the state of consciousness of knowing I am a spiritual being having a human experience. I came here for a purpose, so I automatically belong on this planet. And I can travel the entire planet. I'm entitled to go and explore this entire planet as a citizen of the world. And with that comes certain responsibilities and certain abilities, right, to navigate spaces. I've realized, one, in my lineage, we must be travelers. All of us have travelers in our lineage because when you tap into it, you can easily move in and, like you're saying, find community, find pockets and things like that. But we had this interesting conversation in New York with a group of 8 Black women. And there was like this moment we were having that was very emotional. And people were tapping into this real pain and real rage that was like, where is our place physically? Because as a therapist, as a person who deals with the mind, as a spiritualist, we cannot dismiss the impact and the benefits of having physical space that feels safe and secure and is rooted in a culture that aligns with who you are. In fact, we wouldn't have the mental health issues we have if there were spaces where people could root and have culture and have relationship and feel secure and be validated. I think sometimes in our coping with the fact that every time we have a space, some shit go down and we can't have the space, we kind of reprioritize. We also need the physical environment because it's a massive difference when there's places you can go to and feel accepted and feel normal. Like your whole nervous system responds differently. So how am I dealing with the psychological and spiritual if my physical is constantly triggered by the fact that I'm constantly reminded I'm an other in this space? Even the way it functions, like this paperwork and this shit, why am I doing all this? Like, I would never create a system like that. I would never create a culture like that. And so I do feel like that is like a burning question and desire actually for me. They know like to go, not colonize. I don't believe in that, 1000%. But I do believe in going and forming international family and spaces where you can bond and connect with people who will invite you to coexist or partner or visit or whatever that may look like. I just don't think we can manage it all here because even the spaces that we've been able to hold on to, we've seen how they've been targeted. So that part of the belonging, that's why I love that you talk about gentrification, all these different things. Someone recently has asked me to do something on Juneteenth and they put these things in there. They were like, we would prefer it be celebratory and non-political. And I'm like, how the fuck? Like you prefer not to have a poem about Juneteenth because the reality is when the history is erased, the land will remember. It doesn't forget. And it may not even have healed yet because when we rewrite the history mentally, you can't physically extract it from the land. So here's this land beneath us with all this history, with all this information, all this data that we are constantly trying to upload, download in a culture that is gaslighting everything that we know to be true. And so I do think a lot about the physical space of belonging, right? Without colonizing, what could that look like for us in our highest imagination?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but that is definitely the challenge. And I think that's something that takes time. And I don't mean time as in putting it off. I mean actually being in space, in place for long periods of time to grow those roots, to give yourself and your descendants the opportunity to have that sense of belonging, that sense of connectedness, where you know who you know the space and the place, you understand the terrain, you know the soil. So I'm a gardener. Even that understanding gives you a sense of belonging. And so I don't have a better response other than, yeah, that's the challenge, because like you said, even here, it's like, goodness, can you just leave us alone? Just let us stay here. Like, what in the world? So yeah, going somewhere else, I think you might have a better chance of establishing that for sure. But it takes time and intention.
Yes, I agree. And unlearning.
Absolutely.
If I'm being honest, I don't want to go nowhere else. I feel like there is really something to the fact that you spent your first 5 years in Liberia, and then when you returned, you felt a sense of home. I think that part about you said the land will remember, I think that's maybe why when you went back, you felt a sense of home, is because, like you said, that was the first place you took your steps. That was the first place that you first learned language. And so it was like it was in your bones and the land remembered you. I think that there is something to being birthed in that place and having lineage in that place, even complicated, complex lineage such as yours, having lineage there is something that when you return, you do feel something, which is something that I wrestled with in coming back to South Carolina. So I was dying to get out of South Carolina. Since I was 13, I was like, I'm leaving this place. First chance I get, 18, I'm out of here. And I left and I went to Florida, which is not South proper, you know what I'm saying? But I went to a college where there were people from literally all over the world. It was the first time I met people whose parents weren't born in the United States, or black people who weren't born in the United States. So that really opened my eyes. And then I lived in California, Los Angeles for 8 years, which is like living in another country. A person from South Carolina living in Los Angeles is not like you're even living in another part of the United States. It's literally like, I should have got a passport to come here because this shit is way different, right? But what living in those different places made me realize was that I am a Southerner. I am a Black Southerner. And that sense of home, that's where I feel a sense of belonging. That's where I feel connected to the soil. That's where I feel connected to the land. And so the thought of leaving and going somewhere else for me,
I don't think it means leaving though, Crystal. I want to be clear that finding your place of belonging physically doesn't mean leaving anything. It could be where you are, but I think people just need to think about where is their physical place in addition to the other things, because you being a Southerner and that being your place is very different than me being from California and trying to make your place my place. If I try to go there, what will be different for me, right? So I think Black people need to explore what their place is. Sometimes they just deal with what's right here and they try to make the best of it, but they don't think about that feeling you're talking about. You are a Black Southerner. Like the way you can talk about it, the way you can texturize it, the way you can give it context, 1000%, right? I want more Black people to explore that for themselves. You've also internationally traveled. You've traveled around the country. You know, I have clients who've never left the 6-block radius.
Yeah, I was going
right?
to say, there's
and
some privilege involved here as well, to be able to
sometimes to be able to explore and find out where your place is. My company, we've been talking about trying to create this program called My Soul Says Go, because I kept running across Black women who would say, I've always wanted to go here. I don't know why. I've dreamt about it. I've thought about it, but I've always wanted to go here. And you know, we believe in ancestral data. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's an ancestor that was from that place that's calling them back home, but they can't seem to get out of the 6-block radius. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's, you know, people around them have never traveled and they're telling them bad things about the place. You know, it could be a lot of different things. But that right to feel what you're describing, what Parthena's describing, I think is important to the psychological and spiritual welfare of Black families, and Black mothers might be the ones who end up leading that.
When I talk about I don't want to go anywhere else, feel most at home here, yet it's like this duality that I'm always aware, and maybe it is the ancestral history because we've had to leave and migrate and go somewhere and create community and culture. But I do feel this duality of there's this threat that I have to be prepared to go as a Black person. And I don't like that feeling. It makes me feel like I don't want to go. I know this is where I belong. I don't want to go.
But for safety reasons, you feel like you might have to be prepared.
For safety reasons, like, and I just noticed this, Thea is in your name, like Thea, Parthenia.
Oh,
yeah, like it was like, oh, there's a connection. But
I meet so many cousins on this podcast.
But I'm sure when the coup happened, your dad did not want to leave.
And my dad actually stayed for a while. He stayed for a while because there had always been some sort of political instability, even though people were hunting him. And he knew this. And because there's this idea of, you know, when folks left, whether it was during the period of enslavement when people were stolen, or during a time of a civil war when people leave, there is this removal of this intellectual property as well. So when folks leave, it's like, well, someone's going to have to be here to fill the gap, right? So my dad was an engineer by trade. So he stayed because, number one, it's like, I've built my life here. He was, you know, well known as an engineer. I'm not going anywhere. When this is all said and done, I'm going to be here. But he ended up having to flee to a neighboring country, and then he came over. There is absolutely that pull. So of course it's easier for my mom. And plus she has me. It's like, I got to get my baby out of here.
Right.
But, and I wanted to say too, Crystal, you can be two things at once, right? So you can really want to, and really identify as a Southerner. I don't remember the Medgar Evers quote, but I remember him saying something about feeling a connection to the South and wanting to remain in the South. That there's a good life to be made in the South. There's good land. You know, it's a great place to be, and it is. I enjoy being in the South, but that's what was robbed of us, right? This idea of feeling safe, not feeling like you have to have a backup plan, like you're talking about.
A contingency plan for fucking everything.
Yeah.
The idea of leaving is actually triggering for me. When I hear the conversation around it, it actually makes me angry. The thought that I'm going to have to go. And I never really tapped into that until you spoke about your father, who was like, I'm staying. But that's really how I feel.
To that point, in Blood and Bahadeke, the last piece of my mother's segment, because my mother's people were stayers. My dad's people were adventurers. They would go. And so my mom's people, I call the earth people, settled a space outside of the plantation where they were held and literally still live in that area, like 8.6 miles from where they came into the port. And so in that piece, there's this refrain, who will stay to show them where the graves lay? Meaning like somebody has to stay and hold the tradition. Somebody has to stay and hold the names of the people. Somebody has to stay and and show them where the bodies are. Like there's always somebody who has to stay, because if not, everything's completely, erased. And so my mother's people really hold to that. So in her lineage, leaving is so radical. It was radical for my Aunt Mabel, whatever that situation was, and it was radical for my mom, who came 3,000 miles to California, But I think understanding stewardship, the idea of owning land was always a false concept pre-colonization when we first started thinking about farming. But even then, it was more of a stewardship relationship. It was like, we are working for this land. We are working for nature. We are working with nature. And so it was a very different concept pre the Industrial Revolution and this whole agricultural, complex. So I think that one thing that helps me to manage that is to understand I can't own. not even my children. I can't own. I can at best be a caretaker for it. And even that is temporal, right? Because all things are temporal. And so it's this reminder that wherever I am, I'm responsible for being a steward there. And that goes back to what you were saying, Parthenia, about when you go places, staying long enough to invest in the people there, to invest in the space there, to invest in the relationships there, and to steward wherever you go. And, Akilah S. Richards and I talk a lot about land stewardship, and like if she happens to go through the process of, we don't even like talking about it that way, but to go whatever the legal process is for gaining the rights to a property, which again is a kind of false notion, she'd be doing that so that we would have property. Like it would still be a we. So if she got land in South Africa, I got land in South Africa. If I got land in Panama, she got land in Panama. And it's not that Thea owns this land. It's like, this is a collective, and this is a space where a collective can use this to build, to grow, to teach, to feed, and whatever we need to do. And so I think that kind of stewardship understanding really helps us to get back to a more decolonized understanding of what that belonging is fluid too. It's fluid because our situations will change. Like you're saying, fleeing, you don't know when you have to flee. People didn't know when they have to flee things. They can flee things because of famine. They can flee things because of earthquakes, hurricanes. None of those people want to leave those spaces. However, when we think in terms of stewardship, I think that's where the part about the psychological piece and the belonging is within me helps us to carry that to wherever we go and evolve new traditions and new spaces and things like that.
Yeah, and I'll say I agree completely with what you're saying. That's a hurdle, though, especially folks in Western society, Western cultures. A spiritual hurdle in the sense of kind of what we were taught around, dominion over the earth and all those sorts of things, and not understanding what that really means, that we're supposed to care for it and be good stewards, like you're saying. But then there's also, this idea of meritocracy, of the American dream, of, having your quarter acre, whatever, and it being yours, and, whatever you work toward is yours. And so that, I think,
the idea of individualism.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's certainly a hurdle for a lot of us mentally.
Yeah. I really love the varied representation of the Black experience that's here within the three of us. Always, we have so much, so much. We're like, do we live the same life? Do we, so much in common? But if we dig a little deeper and go a little further back, we see how varied our ancestors' experiences were to lead us to this place. And then Parthenia brings in a whole nother level of a different experience. My folks were stayers, I think, but only in the immediate generation, only to my grandparents' generations. Both sets, paternal and maternal, are where they have been for 100 years. And my parents are both the only ones out of 10 or 12 siblings that left North Carolina. And so I'm an offspring of the leavers, of the staying type kind of folk. So I think that presents a wholly different dynamic. And then for me to marry into the military, and we're moving all the time, still for me a sense of creating and carving out a space of belonging, of home, wherever we go and where we've been. My 13-year-old said to me yesterday, and she's finishing a school program and done with it, and she received some accolades from her teacher, and she said, I did what we always try to do, is I left the thing better than I found it. I left my mark, mommy. You forget some of these things you teach them and you move on, through life. And she reminded me that that's kind of a mantra that we have. We move a lot. We go a lot of different places, but we always try to leave a mark and leave it better than we found it for the next folks. Kind of what we've all been doing generationally and certainly among the four of us. And I think that's really interesting to see the different representations of what that looks like around the country and the world. And Thea, you were talking, I mentioned the privilege that's involved with being able to kind of be internationally traveled and go places and say, it doesn't feel like quite
or even
home.
Nationally travel. Like
nationally, statewide travel is a privilege for a lot of folks. And so I don't take it lightly, the privilege that each of us have had to kind of go in different places and say, this does or doesn't quite fit, and does or doesn't kind of plead or fulfill a part of me that was looking for home base, if you will. And
kind of stuck on the idea that your dad stayed. And so how long was that period of time between the time that your dad stayed and your mom came here?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was a few months.
Okay.
Because maybe longer than that. Because he stayed in the country, I think maybe not very long. But then he had to go to a neighboring country. I think he went to Guinea, and he got stuck there because he didn't have a way to get out. for a while.
Cool is real life, y'all. The coup life is real.
It is.
You know, it's so funny though, because when we had the coup that happened here at the Capitol, other people from other countries were telling me that is a coup, boo.
Yeah.
That is, y'all need to stop calling that
coup.
this.
Yeah.
That is an attempted coup, and that needs to be handled accordingly. We were calling it some other stuff.
I think that we romanticize those kinds of things. I think we romanticize revolution. I think we romanticize coups because we see the people who are resisting in that particular country. Sometimes we align with their beliefs. Like when we think about the spring uprising in Egypt, or when we think about South Africa, and even the way that we tell American history when we talk about the Revolutionary War.
I think so many of us only know coups from what we've seen on TV. And
Yeah. So I keep thinking about this idea of your father staying, because he knew at some point it would be over and he wanted to be there. And I'm thinking about what you said, Thea, about someone had to stay to tell the stories. I have such a deeper appreciation for that than I did before, because I did believe that the radical thing to do was to go. And I do think we should hold both things and understand
all of it.
both things. I think that we do need to be willing to go and to explore. But there's this thing in our culture where the people who stay, like, that is undervalued. We haven't fully explored the value that they bring in terms of being able to hold the stories. And we do it also when we talk about people who are enslaved. Like, there's a line in Black Panther that says, bury me with my people who jumped over because they would have rather died than to have lived as an enslaved person. And I think that we need to be able to hold both as brave, right? Because then I think we can have a conversation about what do you feel in your soul? What do you feel in your spirit? And allow that to guide you from there.
I think this is another thing that white supremacy undoes, is this, again, in colonization, this idea that there's one right way. There's never been one right way. Higher ed, using that as an example, because I know you work in higher ed, and I'm,
God be with you.
You gotta be with me. There was also always this tension between those who want to change the system from within and those who want to tear it down from the outside.
Right.
As opposed to there being this recognition that a little bit of both are going to have to happen. You know what I'm saying? And instead there was this judgment, which again is white supremacy creeping into this liberation movement. Like, the reality is all are required. All hands on deck. All of us contribute uniquely and differently. The more diverse and different we are, the more gifts we have to bring to the table to make sure that this ecosystem that we are developing will be robust, will out-survive us. Something will survive,
And I'll add to that also that when you are actually in the fight, a part of the conflict, those who are doing the work, I don't see that issue between folks who are doing the work. So, for example, among family members or even those from Liberia who left or stayed, I have not once, in the many times that we've talked about folks leaving and staying, which is very often, it's a very centered narrative, but I haven't heard that sort of hitting against one, because folks know what it means personally. So my dad's father stayed and was killed. And so there's an understanding that there's loss in that, but then there's also loss for those who left and came to the States or wherever else they ended up settling. There's tremendous loss in that as well. So for those who are actually in the middle of it and experiencing it and doing the work, for the most part, I have not seen that. It's usually from onlookers who, always have an opinion about everything.
I think that's true for me with my dad's side, which is also an immigrant side, though. My mom's side, which were born here in the United States, I have seen it. I've heard it. My mom says it to me sometimes because I tell her I'm not going to be living here. I'm going to be putting roots in other spaces and building communities in other spaces. And she was a leaver. And she still feels it, remembering that the U.S. handled enslavement very differently than other parts of the world where they begin the whole birthing, breeding process. So you were born into this and raised in this fearful space, and the white people never left. In, Barbados, eventually the white folks left. In all these other places, the white folks left. We are still with our oppressor every single day. And so the mindset is always about security and safety, not about risk and chance and evolving and what could happen and what we could make. It's really about safety, security. And so that conversation is like, what if something happens to me? What if I need you? What if this, as opposed to if you go and we stay, you're going to be able to bring back stuff that benefits us, and we're going to be able to support you from here. Very different conversation from my dad's side, but those are folks who knew what freedom could taste like and feel like, had experienced a culture post-whiteness and outside of it, and were colonized by a different type of white folk.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for kind of operating out of this idea of like, we always have to have our guard. We always have to, even back to what you were talking about,
Crystal. Yeah. The contingency.
We need to have a backup plan. What if something goes wrong? And, living with our oppressors and having to be in this constant state of stress. And this is something, that I study when it comes to gentrification. It's like, we're not looking at the stress it's causing, and that has implications for our physical health, our mental health, individually and communally.
When those thoughts enter my head, like, what if you do have to leave? Like, I have to make a conscious decision to rewrite that whole narrative of like, I am not going to constantly align with that threat. And it's hard because you see the 24-hour news cycle, the constant loop of state-sanctioned violence on Black bodies in many different forms, right? I have to make deliberate, intentional choices not to align with that narrative, because when I do align with that narrative, I am constantly operating out of fear. But when I decide to align with the narrative of, I belong here, this is my soil, then I align with the narrative of liberation. And it's a very hard thing to hold, because in order to align with that narrative, like you said, Parthenia, I am fully aware that death could be an outcome, which challenges me to hold death in a different way. And that was a really, really hard hurdle. But I do think it's something that we have to at least investigate within ourselves when we talk about liberation and when we talk about the future of where we want to be physically.
And I think that idea of kind of reconciling with death, it hits different, because even when I was over in Liberia, it's not as stable as you would want it to be. I remember it passing through my mind, like, well, at least here, if something happens to me, as opposed to it being by police brutality or something, or something like that. To me, it's like, it's a different kind of death. It's like, well, at least I'll know it wasn't because of that. Kind of thing. It was an interesting thought to have.
That is interesting.
Where you go there and it's like, I feel like I can breathe. If I have a disagreement with someone, or if something goes awry, I know that it's not
right. I'm Black. Right. I know it's not because I'm Black.
I mean, certainly there's color.
Right.
So sitting in that and acknowledging that even in Liberia was important for me, because there, I'm considered lighter skin. Here, folks, it's a toss up, maybe. At least there it's like, well, there might be some of that, but at least it's not racist.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's so interesting because death is a part of life, period. And I'm thinking, like, this conversation we're having, and we're all mothers, so these are all things that we hold and think about every day in terms of like trying to create belonging in our homes, this bubble of belonging around our children, while we are still trying to search for belonging ourselves.
Hey, Magic Makers. I just wanted to jump in here and remind you that our Magic Evermore boxes are still on sale. The intention of this box is to help you alchemize the magic inside. Items include a full Black Mama Magic card deck, 4 manifestation crystals, incense from Smell Good Spa, a Magic Evermore picture frame, Black Mama Magic postcards, a gratitude jar, and the herbs jasmine, eucalyptus, and lavender, which represent healing, creativity, and liberation. And the best part is it's an investment in yourself and an investment in the Black Mamas podcast. When you invest in us, you are investing in a platform curated by 3 Black women actively creating spaces of healing, creativity, and liberation. The link to purchase the Magic Evermore box is in our show notes on our website at DEMBlackMamas.com. That's DEM Black MAMAS.com. Now, let's get back to the magic, y'all. I hear more than ever before Black mothers not only talking about leaving the United States, but actively making plans to do so. And so thinking about Liberia in the midst of having the discussions as a Black person, creating community, connecting with people in another space, I find it very interesting that I don't hear people talking about Liberia within that discussion, because I think that's exactly what your ancestors were attempting to do when they left the United States in 1869. And I think there are a lot of lessons that we can learn. And so I want to know, like, for you, well, are you someone who's considering returning to Liberia?
I am considering it. You mentioned that a lot of times folks don't include Liberia in that discussion, and I think for a few reasons, Liberia is stable.
It's not the best example, maybe, because it's not stable yet.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so Liberia has a lot of different tribes, right? But as far as coming together as one nation, it was a colony of the U.S., like in essence. And so while folks might have roots there or connections there to some of the indigenous tribes, it isn't, in my opinion, like some of the other West African countries where there isn't that feeling of it being a colony, that it's, you know, that essentially when you're there, you're in the U.S. Because really, when you go there, you really do get the sense from the people that they are trying to be American. They are trying to hold on to those same ideals of individual, even though it's very much a communal society, very much so. But there's still in the mind this idea of getting for me.
You can see the influence of America.
Yeah, so I think what I hear you telling the people is get as far away as you can when you picking a place. Like get like when you're choosing a place to go, try to choose a place that the U.S. has the least amount of influence in.
Well, and I mean, there's something to be said though for Liberia, because even though it wasn't structured in recent history since its colonization by the U.S., there's still a history there, and there's still belongingness to be found there. There's still peace to be found there, and so. Certainly, it's easier for people like me who have family there, who have a place to go, who people know you through other people. Certainly, that makes it much easier. But for me in Liberia, I was most comfortable in the rural areas. You have Monrovia, the capital, which is bustling. It is overrun. There's entirely too many people there. You know, you got politics and all of that involved in the city. But going out into the...
Yeah, I'm the same way in Panama.
Yeah, it feels so different. Yeah. And so I could see
it feels untamed
myself.
It feels untamed. Yeah, like it hasn't been tapped.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's where I plan to live. When I think about it, it's very similar, like America colonized part of Panama, right? The Canal Zone. They basically built it up to look like a little America. The people they brought over, the Afro-Antillians that were brought over from the islands, that's where they were. The Afro-colonials were in the northern part. Even that's a big difference. When you think about Black in Panama, it's very different to be Afro-colonial and Afro-Antillian. There's some crossover, but they were from Senegal. They came over to pearl dive because they were expert swimmers. And so in the early part, they were hired to do that work versus eventually then enslaved to do that work. And then the other group were brought over into a Jim Crow system. So when I think about the Afro-Antillians in Panama, they have even a more similar experience to us than our Caribbean brothers and sisters, who have a more similar experience to us than our African brothers and sisters, because they got on the boats too. They had to deal with that first ride, but the Afro-Antillians in Panama also understood Jim Crow. They just called it silver and gold. So that understanding of, you can see the American footprint for sure in that part. And I agree, when you go out to the rural part, you get to see the parts that are like untapped. That's where you can really feel the nervous system impact, the bodily impact of not being in the space.
And, let's be clear, there's value in Liberia and other West African nations. And the wealthier countries.
Yes.
And we know the history as well. But even presently, if you come to understand, how some of these wealthier countries are seeking control of
manipulating
resources, absolutely, you come to have a better understanding of how valuable these countries and their resources really are. And so I think it is something to consider. And even thinking about, as a mom, thinking about going overseas, I've had to, and I think, Thea, you mentioned this of what I feel valuable. Right. So, our mothers, our grandmothers, they taught us different things. They did what they needed to survive, and they gave us what we needed to survive. But we've learned that some of the things we can let go of, right? Like I mentioned earlier, this idea of meritocracy, having this particular American dream. We've learned that it's a myth, that it's capitalism. And certainly there are exceptions, but we know that exceptions always rule. And so there's been this personal mothering I've had to do myself.
I love that.
To undo that as I consider leaving.
Can I also add, when you're exploring, if you want to live outside the States, I do think it's like a guttural thing. Again, it may be a place you think you have no connection to, but our soul has had many journeys, and these bodies, they carry so much data that just trust your instinct. It may not be a place you would have thought of. It may not even be a Black space. And if I'm being honest, there's so much in this body, right? But I will say also, you are American. And that is something Black folks need to hear, because we don't feel American. We don't feel American. We feel Black American. There's a very distinct thing. We have our own subculture. But you realize, yes, both your biological parents might be Black, but your Uncle Sam has also raised you. And you can go and you can quickly see, even if you think you have nothing and you have no privilege when you're here, you realize you have a lot of privilege, but you also realize you come with a history. Because other countries don't think in terms of race that way. They think in terms of nationality. And my passport is just American. It don't say Black American. And so you have to know you come with a history of America that probably did something or was involved in something in them countries. And so that is an interesting dynamic, to go from being an oppressed person to a privileged person, but also a person who is attached to the oppression that may have happened in that space. It's a lot of humbling and sitting. You don't like it, it don't feel right and don't feel. You be like, wait a minute, they do me dirty too. And maybe you can get to that conversation, but not on a governmental level. You're not going to have that conversation with governments.
I remember in South Africa, we were working with a group of South African women. So it was 5 Black American women and 5 South African women. And I always say, I accepted that I am an American when I left the country, because I remember distinctly when they called us Americans, it was like, well, the Americans can go over here. And I was like, we were all like, ooh, we don't identify as American. And they were like, what are you? That would they were like, that would be me not identifying as South African. But it made me realize how I had allowed this country to displace me within my own land. And so leaving made me realize that I am an American. And so when I came back, I held American in a different kind of way. And I experienced that privilege, because all Black country, right? So people are assuming that I am South African. And then when I open my mouth to speak,
your mouth, that's it.
They hear the American accent, and the way in which they interact with me would change. And that's really a point also when I began to realize that not only I am an American, but I am a Southern American. I'm a Black Southern American. And it really made me interrogate, what is home to me? What is place to me? Where do I belong? Where do I feel connected? But I had to leave and feel, quite frankly, I guess, that otherness.
Yeah. Because we romanticize Africa too.
For sure. For sure. 1000%. Yeah.
What I've been encouraging Black folks from America to really consider that many Latin American countries are large population African or African descent and Caribbean. And there's a little bit more wiggle room there sometimes, because there was the enslavement experience, right? Where the colonization experience of Africa, and there was a trans-African slave experience too, but that was different than the transatlantic one. Then there can be a different bonding point. I think I've experienced, like, there's a little bit more empathy a relatability, because that piece that Parthenia talked about, we didn't get there in this particular conversation, but there is some reconciliation that needs to happen between us and West Africa in terms of the participation in the transatlantic slave trade. And so there is still like this tendency to be like, what slave trade? What slaves? What happened? And that can feel very like, oh, bitch, you know what we're talking about, right? But I'm being very crass about this for my African brothers and sisters. I love you and I see you. I'm just being very simple about it. But in the Caribbean, it's like, yeah, that happened. I get it, I understand, And what I found with my folks that are Afro-Caribbean, my folks that are Afro-Latino, is they don't idealize Africa the same way. They recognize that they created something new, which is, I think, our struggle here, right, is that we did create something new, but it's being fought to not be taught in schools. They're constantly stealing it and claiming it as their own. So like where they were like, we're Jamaicans now, this is what it is, and we ain't looking back necessarily because we created something here that we like. We're like, we created something, but we don't get to like sit and enjoy it or be it or exist in it because white supremacy is either erasing it or acting like they did it, right? I just say that because people romanticize and they want to go all the way back to Africa, which you can. I think that's a good part of the journey. And I do that as well. I go to Africa as well. And I think if you're stepping your foot out, you're stepping your toe out there, you might want to step your toe to the Caribbean or, Central America first and then Africa, because it's a different mindset about who we are in relationships sometimes. Because, we got a lot of hopes riding on that. We Black Queen in, Black King in, we doing a lot of things. And so we go there. They know we have this romanticized idea, and it's kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, it could be a harsh experience. I've experienced a lot of Black Americans have a pretty disappointing experience.
So my assumption was, because I was waiting to return,
that they were waiting for you to return,
that they were waiting for me as well, and they were not. So
it's like, mother, and she's like, who are you? I have a whole new family now. I started my life over. I'm so sorry, but my husband cannot see you. You must go. I was like, wait, but you've been waiting for this moment. In your head, it was a whole thing. That's what happened to Black folks. I'm just trying to prepare us. Whereas, it's a little different when you go to these other stops first. I'm just trying to point out because I don't want nobody getting hurt feelings.
What I had to realize. And this is something that I've heard you talk about too, Parthenia, in a way that really expanded my thought process behind it and made me realize that, yes, we have to dismantle systemic and institutional oppression, but we also have to dismantle colonization.
Absolutely.
And that is work beyond the borders. And the sort of sting that I felt when I was like, okay, no, they weren't waiting on me to return, were assumptions that I made about who and what they were and what they knew of our journey, and not in the reality of what happens when you break up a people.
We assume they know our story, and we also don't know theirs. Yeah. They're not taught. A lot of places are not taught about it at all. And we're not taught because we weren't colonized. We were enslaved. But what colonization and neo-colonization did in terms of erasing traditions, erasing religion, turning a people and a culture in on itself is what colonization ultimately does, which is a brainwashing. Now, we did a brainwashing, but again, it's a different thing when people come looking like, we're here to help you. We're here to help save you from yourself and make your life better and, all these things.
Parthenia, in our group, you talked about, as descendants of enslaved peoples, we often say our ancestors were a stolen people, right? And so in our group, I remember you talking about what was actually stolen. And when you broke it down, I was like, oh, so they lost as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great segue from your last comment about our narratives, right? So here in the States, in a lot of the places, our narrative is around enslavement. But if we think about it a little bit more, it's a lot more than that for the people who remained on the continent. And it's more than just the physical stealing of bodies. But if you think about it, and as you learn more about individuals who were chosen, they were chosen because they were skilled at their They knew how to plan. They knew how to build. They knew certain things. These white people, they needed these people. And so there's this intellectual theft that occurred at that time and left a hole. And so we, as members of the diaspora, we can, center our narrative around enslavement. That's fine. But there's also that narrative that considers the loss experience of the continent. But that's also our narrative to claim. Think about it. And it's one that I think can make us feel a little bit more connected to the land and to the people there. And of course, as I mentioned with the war, there's that second intellectual loss, because if you think about it, folks who are able to leave during a civil war are those who have the most connections, those with authority, those with education, those who are connected to those individuals with authority. And so when this is typically true for most places during civil war, those are the people that lead. And so if we think about it in terms of those things that were taken as well, then maybe we feel more of a responsibility to go back or go back.
I love that.
Yeah, it makes me think about reparations different as well, that it is a global thing that needs to be repaid. It really expanded my thought process around it and actually did some healing that I needed to do.
There is a lot of healing that has to happen there. I mean, once we get through this white supremacy thing, I think we're going to get around to that family meeting. And that's going to be a hell of a family meeting, because we got some questions for aunties and uncles, and they got questions for us. But I welcome that meeting.
Yeah. I think we need to have the meeting now. I don't think we should wait until.
No, I don't think we should wait.
We can't depend on them to end things. They don't end things well. They don't transition well.
They don't transition well.
They don't. I mean, we all saw January 6th, and we're still calling it an insurrection, not a coup.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to have that conversation now. But the thought of stripping the intellectual property or the skill from there really, really expanded like how I thought of things. And I think if you look at history, or if you pay attention to world events, it is the next space that, not that they haven't, stripped it already, but I can see what's coming there. Because like you said, they can see the value of the resources that are there.
And that's why some nations are trying to at least, create the same sort of currency to be used throughout nations to allow folks to travel among the nations so that they have this power. Because you're right. It's like the next frontier.
It is. It's the next frontier.
Yeah.
A returning.
Yeah.
A returning.
Done it. Yeah.
A returning. Which is why the thought of leaving, I think, kind of triggers me too. It's because I can see what they're about to do, And so it's like preempting that, right? Not leaving here to necessarily escape, but leaving here to build.
That's it.
And what I see a lot of people doing is leaving here to escape and not necessarily to build. And so that kind of triggers me as well.
But I do think Black Americans, I do love, within my lineage, it's such a diasporic experience, from Afro-Latino to Afro-Caribbean to actual African descendant to East Africa and West Africa. Like, it makes me feel like Black Americans are really uniquely qualified to connect the diaspora. And they do, through a lot of influences at this moment. But when you also think about some of the movements, like my dad talks about how learning he was Black from Black Americans made him feel connected and empowered them to start to fight back against the Americans in Panama. Like, that's important. Or you see somebody in Brazil at an uprising wearing a shirt of a Black, or I do think that we have to think not colonizing, but connecting forces. Like, we know what it means like to create family out of no fucking family, out of people whose names were different and came from different places. We had to patchwork family. We still do it. We got play cousins and we got this. So we never lost that sense of community and connecting, even through the strain of it all. We had to create new ways. And surely we can go to spaces and repair and recreate and reconnect for the sake of actually being able to bring back some of that privilege in a way that can benefit the space within the cultural context of that space. So what I mean by that is some ideas like middle class. I think about the New Deal. And I think about that in a non-political way. I think about how do people build that on a communal level without even waiting for the government to do it, but like just by an entrepreneur in a small town in a whole nother country thinking, how can I create opportunities for people in this small town to learn what I learn, even if money is a problem or we can barter or whatever. So I think there are concepts that we are uniquely qualified to repurpose in some of these spaces in a way that works well within their cultural values. And so there are new skills that we've developed through this time that we can offer back and be of benefit and of community too. I just think it takes stepping a little bit outside of our bubble and working together to give each other access to some of these
I really
things.
love that. Thank you for raising that. Yeah. And I think it connects well with what Parthenia was saying about the resources, the intellectual resources and other talents that were stripped from there. I think that there's a beautiful way to kind of reconcile that with the knowledge that we've gained through having had to kind of lend that back in order to make the connections and further this. Yeah.
Like organically too, not in a way like we're coming to help. Like, no, but like if you visit a place and you make an organic connection and you feel like that feels like a natural thing, why not?
That would be healing for me, because it would make me feel like what my ancestors went through wasn't in vain, that there was something created from that life of immense pain and atrocity that can be poured back into the space that they came from. That would be healing for me, I think.
I mean, there are people out there who still don't know about mac and cheese, y'all. We got work to do. We got work to do.
Yeah, and I think we do need to recognize our power, when it comes to those sorts of things. And also, Crystal, what you said earlier about feeling triggered by the idea of, having to go somewhere else. That is one of the repercussions of white supremacy, right? Like this disruption of peace. It's not connected.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah. Not because we still have the power. We just are made to not recognize it. It is until not recently and even not fully, but in science, we're just starting to recognize that the things that we do, the ways that we build community, the ways that we connect to one another, the ways that we create our society with one another, is so beneficial to your body, to your mental self, to your physical self. And it's only just now starting to be recognized as beneficial. And I think you said, Thea, if we can begin to pull that knowledge together that we have, all the different types of knowing that we have.
That we've evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, like you said, it's not your complex type thing. It's a coming together and using what we've learned to benefit.
Because I'll tell you, like, I can see how colonizing happens. I can see it, because if you're from outside of the culture and you go to a place where it's very normal for them to be around a certain element or around a certain thing, it's so normal that they don't see it as valuable the way you see it as valuable. It's a very slippery slope. When I'm in Panama, like growing up in cities and inner cities where, the trees are forced to be there. They wouldn't naturally be there, where the water you have to travel to, where things like that. When I'm there and I can see and feel so much nature, but everybody's like, this is just everyday life for them. I'm like, I can bring a skill set to this, but I have to be careful how I do it with community, because I can be like, oh, let me just take advantage of the fact that they don't care about these acres of land. So I think there's a way to do that in a way that's like, how do I bring community in, invest in community, make them a part of it, and steward together? Because it's a slippery slope. But my point is that our perspective can shed light on something that may have lost its value over time just from daily encountering it. And that could be a resource for that community economically before somebody else comes in and takes it and does what they want with it, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
And something that I always tell my students, and I teach social work students, is that people are the experts of their lives. So when you go into spaces and places, understand that you don't have answers, that you have to listen to the folks that there. And even the dualities that exist in me in regard to my history, as far as, being Liberian and American, understanding that anyone is capable of anything, that there are things in us that we don't know.
Black people do not like to talk about that.
Black people do not like to talk about. We do, but yeah.
No, it's real.
Yeah.
We don't want to admit that we can't be in someone else's story. Even
Now, hold up now. We weren't planning to go that far. Okay, Parthenia?
No, you doing good. Don't you apologize. Don't you back down. Don't you back down.
It's tight up
It
in
was
here.
tight when she started the story about Liberia. It's been tight.
It's tight.
It's been tight. But that's true on every level. Like I always tell people, if you could only see yourself as the victim, then you've definitely been a perpetrator. Because you have to be able to see yourself as both. Because that's nature. That's nature. That's truth. There's no yin without yang. There's no up without down. If you're one thing, you're the other. I think this is so powerful for people to recognize what you're saying because it allows you to stand and own your power very differently. When you see yourself as only the victim of something and not the potential perpetrator of something, like I would never do that. You don't know that. And when you start loving all of yourself, even the parts of you that can cause harm, you begin to harness your power in a completely different way.
Thank you for bringing us back around. Thank you for bringing us back around.
I brought us back. I just need to just stay with me for a minute.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nikisha talked about privilege, being able to travel and go internationally. And you, Parthenia, talked about you saw that the people who were able to leave were people who had privilege. So in this moment, people are having this conversation about leaving, about going to other spaces, right? But we know everyone doesn't have that privilege. And if we all had to leave tomorrow, everyone wouldn't be able to leave, right? And so how do we think about this expansion that's going on right now with Black people talking about going to other spaces and building and actually going to other spaces, right? How do we have this discussion in a communal way that thinks about all of those things and make this expansive experience more communal than escapism?
Part of it is that we need to, number one, be honest with ourselves, you're saying, but also, you know how I heard it some time ago when we say we know that as parents we can't necessarily prepare the world for our children, so we try to prepare the world. I think we need to think about how we still do the work, that we're not somewhere else, and because we think it'll be better, and it may be in some way, and not so much ways, but we have to continue to work.
Thank you. I was going to say,
I mean,
you know, I said everybody won't make it to the promised land. Everybody ain't going to go. Some people will choose that because this is what the conditioning does, right? Or it may not even be conditioning. They just maybe scared.
For me,
it could be a lot of different reasons.
For me, it's not conditioning.
I think what the leavers get to do with that new brain space that's not occupied by racism is create new solutions that can then be applied back home, because it's really hard. I mean, it's amazing we create what we create under these circumstances, but then sometimes you have to imagine, what could I think of in a space where that wasn't occupying? So for me, part of the point of building outside of here is to build the Afro future. What does that look like? What would our education look like? What will our medicine look like? What will our relationships look like? What will our homes look like? And it's easier to build that in spaces that still have the cultural norming of an African-centered perspective than it is to try to imagine it within a white paradigm sometimes.
I think we saw a lot of activists leave the country in order to have that mental space. But I also think we need to kind of reframe, and we touched on this earlier, reframe how we think about the continent of Africa and even some of the areas. It's not a in the way that think about it. We have to make it what we would want it to be for ourselves. I mean, I don't mean going stuff. I think it also takes an internal piece that a lot of us just have, and it's not something that you just reach and it's done. It's something that we have a hard time maintaining, I think, as Black people living in America. And so being able to do that inner work so that if you want to go somewhere else, then doing it so that if you decide you want to stay, you're doing that inside work, but then there's also this extra political, racial, class work that needs to be done to make it such that you can have that same faith, that same spiritual space to be created.
Yeah, I think that's good. I love that reframing how we're thinking about leaving and making it more of an expansive conversation and not just one of escapism, but one of building and creating, especially for those of us who are planning to stay. So, yeah. Well,
Somebody
I'm
gotta
not
stay to tell them where the
staying
graves lay.
I'm not staying to tell them where the graves are. I'm not staying to tell where the graves are.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I am a culture keeper. I mean, for me, that space that you all talked about, especially when you said when you went back to Liberia and the rural area, and when you go back to Panama, it's the rural area. For me, I grew up in the Black rural South. And when I go back to the home that I grew up in, the land that I grew up on, it's when I feel that. It's when I feel that the most. And it's a very, very real thing for me. And Black rural South is very different from white rural. And I didn't even know there was a difference until I left. And when you leave, I do think your lens does expand. When you leave, when you go explore other spaces, your lens does expand and you're able to see where you come from a lot clearer. I do think that's true.
And I'll just add that you can have that click in many space, more than one space too. I don't want people to feel like it's only in one space I feel that click. I actually feel that space in like 4. My grandmother's land, Panama, Los Angeles, and Sharm. And so like I love that. I love that I have multiple clicks. I didn't know I did.
And let me say this. I think there's definitely something to be said, and y'all talked about this earlier, for the land itself. So the fact that, when I arrived in Liberia and the rural areas speaking to me, it is actual, like when I'm talking about the growing, like they have life, they have connection to us. I think in ways that we can't explain there.
Yeah.
But it's there, and there's something to be said for that. And I think that's why, when we talk about going other places, sometimes people are out for something that they have to create themselves. And so it takes, and that's what people in other nations and other spaces, other places, they try to connect to the land that we.
Yeah, I think the going other places kind of forced me to do that spiritual work, because if I had just gone to the other places and not done the spiritual work, then I don't know if I would have recognized what that feeling was when I go back to the land. It's a feeling of sacredness. I don't even want to grow anything on it. Like it's just like, ooh, it's so sacred. So when I do decide to plant something on it, because of that feeling, I'm definitely going to be intentional, because I almost like don't want to touch it, because it's like this is holy, for me. It's a cellular connection that I feel with it. Whereas if I just go somewhere and I see the opportunity because someone's not valuing that, but I can see the value in it, then I'm transactional. But when I go to a place and I get this cellular connection, this cellular feeling, the way in which I interact with that land is going to be different. And I've been saying it's because I went away and it expanded my lens, but it's because I did the spiritual work as well.
Talk about the land, that you're attached to and seeing it as sacred. That's an important thing. I think also, though, we need to see it as a part of us. So while you want to make sure that you do whatever's necessary to preserve it, to sustain it, understand that it's there for you. It's there to sustain you in the same way that you sustain it. So I would, push back against that fear to cultivate on the land, because that's what it's there for. It's there for you in the same way that you are there for it.
Yeah. Yeah, this was good. I think this
is
will...
rich. Thank you, cousin.
Just feeling in real time. So tell people what you have going on, what's up next for you, and where they can find you.
Yeah, so, let me say first, specifically to Liberia, like I said, my family's from Arlington. Arlington is a rural area. They struggle to get just basic needs. The main things right now, we're trying to have kind of a pop-up clinic, make sure they have medication. Education is a real need. I mean, you have girls as young as 14, 15, 16 getting pregnant and not knowing how they got pregnant, like literally not knowing how reproduction works. And so things around reproductive education in general. On Instagram, if you go to agape_Liberia, that's AGAP_Liberia, you'll be able to see some of the work that we're doing there and eventually how folks might be able to help along those lines. Personally, I am in my PhD program, still trying to finish that up. Hopefully I'll finish up my dissertation soon. So that is my main focus, in addition to, you know, the other things that you mentioned earlier that I do. You can find me as Parthenia Luke, PartheniaLouise, everywhere. That's my Instagram, that's my Twitter, that's my Facebook.
It's everything.
So you can get in touch with me and if it helps using that handle anywhere.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I have so many more questions, but we'll create another opportunity
Maybe a live.
to talk about those things. Yeah. We'll do a live. But thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Here in the Black Mama Magic Room.
For sharing your
This is really
story
good.
with us. Yeah, we really appreciate you. And I think that this is
going to have a lot of conversation around it.
What happened, Keish?
a dog and baby at the door. It just got real.
Oh,
It's a lot going on. But yeah, we appreciate you sharing your story with us. And I think it's going to really ignite some rich conversation among our listeners. And we'll continue the conversation, like you said, on the live or ongoing because of the time that you share with us. So thank you.
Thank y'all so much.
too.
Thank you.
Our final segment, Black Mama Say, is where we put our own twist on sayings from Black Mamas. Today's is, but what I do know is. You want me to go first?
yeah, Nikisha, if you're ready, jump in. Tag.
Well, listen, my people are small. My people are young. This is going to come from my mothering journey. So, you know, you got these little kids.
Mine is from my mothering journey, too. Okay.
And they got their little friends, and they come home and say, but so-and-so is allowed to do this. So-and-so, you know, they're going over here. And I quite often say, I don't know what's going on in their house, but what I do know is up in here, that's not gonna fly. And you can fill in the blank. Any scenario. It works.
No, it works.
You know what would make that even blacker? And I just had this conversation with my sister. I couldn't remember the number of her house. And so I was like, I should know that, because all of my life, whenever she would tell her kids they couldn't do something, or they would say that, you know, I'm just going to give a fake number, but she would say, well, I don't know what they doing at such and such, but at 557 Courtyard Lane, she would rattle off her address.
That's when you really mean it. You really mean it.
Really mean it.
That's an ode to the bills. That's an ode to the bills. The reason you get specific, and let me break this down, Black people. The reason you get specific is because the gas bill, the electric bill, the cable bill, the water bill, the trash bill, all them bills say what? 557 Courtyard Road. And ain't narrow none of them got your name on it. So whoever makes decisions is the one who them is coming to. And that's an ode. That's a nod.
Yeah.
To that.
That's
to the
a
bills.
nod to the bills. Yeah. Like it was a melody with it. Even when my cousin did it with my little cousin, it like went up at the end. I don't know what they're doing at da 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 da, but at da 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 da.
I like
you know what I'm
that.
saying?
That's what we gonna do.
It was, yeah.
Crystal, with your community potluck that y'all had,
But what community potluck?
Oh, the
You
one
know.
with the white neighbors.
Yeah.
I was able to be on the phone for that invitation.
we sent our kids with full bellies.
We sent our kids with full
and we said we
bellies,
don't
right.
know what they eating over there, or who
Over
had
there.
cats on the counter or whatever. What I
Right.
do know is, if you feel a little empty in the tummy, you'll come on
Yeah.
back home and eat.
You come back here to
You know,
557.
It works. It works so many
Courtyard
ways.
Lane.
What do
Yeah,
you
my-
know? What do you know, Crystal?
What do I know? So this is what I know. I don't know how Jesus managed to stay up on the cross all that time and do sacrifice and crucify himself.
Oof, that was
But what I do know is that Jesus paid it all, so I don't have to. So during this parenting journey, what I learned is self-sacrifice tells people that unconditional love equals unlimited capacity.
So I hear another Black mama say, emerging from that one, which is, do I look like Jesus?
That's it. That's
I
it.
don't know how Jesus did it, but I know he paid it all. So I will not be making any more deposits.
That sounds like what I'm not finna do.
That is a cousin of what I'm not going to do.
So,
That is a cousin.
I'm telling you, Black mamas, Black women, unconditional love does not equal unlimited capacity. We don't have to be Jesus. You can love someone unconditionally, but that doesn't mean you have to have unlimited capacity. So,
Crystal,
that
I'll be honest and say that was a little more Baptist than I expected you to come today.
That's
That was
the
a little more-
Baptist.
you know, I do practice Afro spirituality.
But it's in the roots.
It's in the roots, though. And unlike, a lot of people, which I have a lot of sympathy for, my experience in the Black church was very positive, actually.
The saints don't have to stay mad at us. They don't have to stay mad.
No, I love gospel music.
Let's just agree that what's kept us here has been the gospel music. Let me
I cannot deny
gangsta
that.
skate over to
Okay. Smooth like. Let's see.
like
Let's see.
Ursher. Like Ursher on skates. Because picking up from where Crystal left off, I'm not going to tell you how to run your house, or they just outright, oh, you don't know who the fuck I am-ness that occurs within a family. I'm not going to tell you what to do about that. But here's what I do know. When you keep you a little stash and you can just run the fuck away, and I'm not talking about, let me just put together $50 and hit up this Motel 6. I'm talking about the kind of runaway that make you say, should a bitch go back? I don't know much, but what I do know is that when you trying to teach these Negroes in your house a lesson, you got to upgrade. You will look, you will run, you'll say, I'm going to take a trip. You know what I want you to do? Take that trip and ask yourself what to make it a little bit more sweeter. Is it an upgrade to first class? Are you at a 3-star hotel? Do you want to look at a 4-star? Listen, pay the extra money. Let me tell you something. By day 2, you will forget there was a problem at all. And you will see a glimpse of a better life.
Why did your
Here's the
voice
thing.
crack?
Here's
Why did your
thing.
voice?
And they will see it too. Because there won't be no check-in phone calls. And there won't be no return texts. And by the time you come home, they'll be looking like, we're so glad you chose to come back this time. This time. So all I'm saying is, when you have hung on that cross and you have sacrificed,
Good. That's a good transition.
and
That's good.
you are still being asked to give without a gratitude for the first sacrifice, I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, what I do know is,
What I do
there's
know
an
is
upgrade in the bush.
Oh,
I said there's an upgrade in the bush.
upgrade.
Take the upgrade. Treat yourself. And not to some same level shit. Some shit that make you really think, I can set up an OnlyFans page right now and live like this forever. I never gotta go back. It reminds you, let me tell you what, we need to be reminded.
Not only
We need your little ankle. We need you to be reminded that this is a choice. Staying in this home, helping these people, loving these people. I mean, because I could love somebody from anywhere, to be quite honest. Love, who can see love? It's ethereal. I could love you from anywhere. I could love you from 4 seasons. I may even love you more. I may even love you more. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, y'all. After you done all you can, you just upgrade to the nearest hotel.
Upgrade.
And don't go for one day. It's not sufficient. You need at least 2. But here's the thing. You don't let nobody know it's 2. You go for the one, and then you decide while you're there to stay for another day.
I need one more.
And then you take
need
it.
one more.
And then you take it. Just to remind yourself that you can, and that this is all a choice. And if I want to smite their lives today, I can. I can snatch it. And just that little bit of reminder of your power will make you come back and settle in a little bit differently. That's a free one. I know I freed somebody.
That was good. That was good.
So follow us on Instagram at Dim Black Mamas Podcast. And if you don't want to miss a minute of the magic and to stay up to date with everything we're conjuring, be sure to sign up for our newsletter, The Mothership, which drops in your box twice a month.
Sort of.
Ish.
And
Thank
don't
you.
forget
Sorta.
to check out our website, www.demblackmamas.com. You can also send us your thoughts about the show, show us some love, and ask some questions at magic@demblackmamas.com.
And be sure to listen and subscribe to our sister podcast,
Sort of.
Shaping the Ship.
I just dropped a new episode too.
Ish. Ish. No, you don't. No, you're resting. You're resting right now.
Right where we are. And if you're a Black mom in need of love and support, join the new app for Black mamas, Meet Akina. Founded by Black mom and entrepreneur Lee Butler, Meet Akina is the new social media app for Black mamas, Black bonus mamas, and aunties. Finally, if you are a Black podcaster, interested in a community that nurtures you and affirms you, join Black Pod Collective. And the links for all of those are in our show notes on our website. And in closing, we wish you
Fun?
expansion and...
Wait, listen. What I wish for you, dear listener, is too much. It's too big for a word, is what it is.
Oh my God.
Okay? Dear listener, who is not being shady and judging me in this moment.
being curious.
What I wish for you is it's too much.
Bitch, I'm judging.
Don't judge, listener. Y'all know how it is, okay? Sometimes it's just too big. It's too big to narrow it down to one word, okay? What I'm wishing for you this year is progression, forward movement.
I think that might have been along the lines of something you had said.
That's what I wish you. Pick one of those, okay?
Pick one of those.
Since when is the ending word multiple
Since
choice?
when is it? Pick one of those.
I do my best to executive produce this podcast. I do my best.
Y'all see what I have to put up with? Y'all see what I have to put up with?
Girl, bye y'all.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.